Hello and welcome back to the Sell Like You podcast with me, Harriet Meller. And today we're talking about turning tech jargon into gold. Now, this week alone, I have run a whole host of workshops, and usually I run a couple each week, that is for sure. But this week it's been very heavy around turning the technical jargon or really understanding the technical outcomes so that you can drive better, more consistent conversations within your prospects or within your existing clients. Now, I've always been in a really fortunate position where I've been able to talk and speak to lots of different organizations about lots of different technologies. I was a reseller, an integrator, and therefore we worked with different organizations, different vendors to be able to join the dots with problems that we identified in the market. Now, something I found really frustrating early on was that we had all of these different vendors and these different opportunities, but they didn't all seem to kind of make sense or blend in or be able to explain the difference between the two or about how they complemented. And for me, learning styles, everybody has a different learning style, but I found for me, I'm a doer. I'm just a let's go out and figure it out and make sure it works in real life rather than writing about it too much. Hence why I didn't go to university. But the essence of these building blocks was that if I could learn and understand one type of technology, I could therefore learn the second one and the third one and the fourth one. Because once you've got a really solid foundation of the technology and cybersecurity landscape, everything else fits within that. And even though something brand new may come out, I can guarantee there'll be a way to weave that back in. Now, when we are able to explain something, I always break it down into three areas. So I would say if we can explain something really well to our ideal client. So if we're thinking about, we're dealing with CIOs, we're dealing with CISOs, we're dealing with these technical leaders or implementers. So we need to be able to have a conversation with them. So that's our first tick. Our second tick is that can we deal with somebody or articulate the offering to somebody in a C-level or leadership position that maybe is not as technical, so very driven around outcomes and strategic views. And then thirdly, can you explain it to your friend, your mum, your dad, your sister, your gran, your aunts, whoever that may be, because that will truly mean that you can articulate it to anybody. Now, that level of understanding takes time. So it's not saying that you need to come in with all of this, but that is the goal of where you want to get to. Now, often salespeople will say that or come across that they need to know everything. And for me, that's probably the worst thing. The worst thing you could do as a salesperson that's not technical is try and be too technical. And what happens then is you'll fall over what you're trying to say or how you're trying to explain, or you'll end up lying or bending the truth without owning the fact that, well, look, I'm driven by outcomes. I'm here to support you in achieving what you're trying to do. And my job is to sit with you and find the right people and bring them in to have those conversations with you. And so every time we're understanding or learning a new technology, often I'll go into organizations where I'm running training and I won't have heard of the technology. I won't have heard of the SaaS platform. And so I have to really quickly understand what it is that it does and the outcome that it generates. And I do that by using the framework that I teach. And that's allowed me to go into many, many, many different industries and learn so many different technologies and be able to apply those learnings again and again and again. I was in a training session within my team. We're working with a number of vendors doing lead development. And one of the questions I got asked was, how does Netscope and Gigamon compete? Why would you use one over the other? And I thought it was really interesting because for me, I know that they don't cross over. There isn't you use this vendor over this vendor. And so I then have to become even better at training and even better at being able to articulate that, because nowadays it's not good enough to just say they just don't. And my team aren't going to just take that because they're the ones out there on the phones having these conversations. And so what I was able to do was able to explain what they already know about each vendor and then explain the key differences between the network and the cloud and where the data set's sitting to be able to articulate the differences and be able to do it in a way where we could use objects in a room. And that really was able to test my knowledge, but also ensure that my team truly understand. And so this week we went in, I mentioned we've been doing some workshops, and this week we went in and we ran workshops for two very, very different organizations. And we were able to unpick the fact that although one of them was only selling they've got one SaaS platform, they've essentially got two tools or two options of how they can serve their audience. It was still very much focused on the tech, very much focused on the doing, not focused on the outcomes. And when we focused on the technology and the way that we do it and the feature set, we lose the attraction, we lose that stickiness of we can drive this outcome and make it a complete no-brainer for you and your organization. We therefore get stuck into the weeds, as I would say, and we just don't progress that further. The second workshop we ran was for an integrator reseller and a whole host of vendors, which I love to see. But again, you'll find people within each of those teams with confidence levels within each of those vendor sets. And that's great because now we've got specialists, but we need to have that other layer of understanding so we can go out and have conversations. When we're running things like a reignite, or when we've had training with a vendor, or we've been off and run an offsite, we come back pumped and ready to go because we feel equipped and we feel that we can go out and really confidently have a conversation, and we already have in our heads who we're going to go out and speak to. The challenge comes when we have the vendors that are coming into the office with their 40-page deck of technical jargon, and they walk away an hour later and we still have no idea what we're meant to be doing. And that was how I used to feel, as I mentioned before, when I was learning about all these new cybersecurity vendors coming through. I just didn't know how I was going to position the second one and the third one and the fourth one. So I just didn't. And I stuck with what I knew. And that was great for me because I could really build some traction there. But what it meant was that for those vendors that really wanted us to start integrating their message into our conversations, we just couldn't, because I can't just throw out the word and just hope that they are going to say yes to me. Now, with trust and with the right relationships, you can absolutely do that. But the majority of those want a bit more, and you don't just want to be throwing stuff against the wall and hoping that something sticks. And so the shift that we've been able to make, and the shift, I guess, really that I made early on, was that I was able to build out a list of questions that I needed to ask. And this is going really back to basics of building out list of qualification questions and list of reignite strategy and replicating our ideal clients templates and all of these things that we probably know how to do half of them, but we're just not executing to the level that we need to really, truly see that impact. And so I built out this list of questions. So it meant that when the vendors would come in with their 60-page decks, the challenge that they've got, especially in Australia, we get given them from America. So American opportunities come in, or the description and the examples come through. They're given to the salesperson at that vendor, and the rep comes out to us and delivers this 60-slide document of all these fun, fancy, whizzing across the screen things that don't really mean anything to us. So at the end of that, I would get them to close away their presentation and we turn to a whiteboard. And for those of you that have worked with me or have seen me in training, I love a whiteboard. I love getting out some colors and drawing terrible diagrams of people and arrows into something else. And it's definitely not my forte, but it's the way that I'm able to really, truly describe. And so what I would do was that I would present back to the vendor my understanding and my learning. They would fix what it was that I didn't really understand, make sure I understood it, and then we'd go away. Now, for those first few sessions, that took hours and hours and hours, because their way of describing it was the way that they'd been trained by the vendor, and all they care about is their technology. And then when we translate that into me of having these conversations as a reseller or an integrator, I have to be able to articulate that across multiple different organizations, whilst also describing multiple different technologies and vendors to achieve the outcome that I've identified for a problem that I know exists. Okay. So what I've been able to do in there was then be able to have this list of questions, draw out this opportunity, or draw out this ability to be able to describe what it is that they do from my understanding, make sure it aligns and move through. Now we can do it in less than 30 minutes because the vendors are aware of what we're going to be asking. We could share with them this template and this guide as to what we need to understand, and then they could take us through the extra, because the true learning comes from from doing it. It comes from actually selling. It comes from actually having a conversation. It comes from getting the no's, stumbling over your words, not being able to articulate it properly, and then being able to do it over more time. And I've just found that for me, learning through questioning and through making sure it makes sense for me and the way that I approach sales was the best way to do it. But it meant that they're going to be better at it. It meant that they could take the questions that I've asked and the way that I've learned to other resellers. And so today, that's essentially what I'm doing with organizations, is helping them be able to articulate and go from this technical jargon, whether it be complexity rather than technology, but being able to translate that into a conversation so that we can pique the interest and drive them through into an opportunity. Now, as a team, if you've got technical people in there, you can lean on them. You can make sure that you understand. The key that really cements all of this together is being able to articulate a story. Now, I'll give you a little example. So I'll give you two. So one example was that I'd been over, and this was early on in my career, we were a big Sophos integrator and reseller. And Sophos was really where I cut my teeth around cybersecurity knowledge and really got to understand the channel, how the channel works, who cares about us, how you get recognized in vendors, the distribution process. All of that really made sense for me using Sophos as the example. And I remember I'd been over to, I think the first one was in Bali. We went to Bali and Bangkok a few times. Every year they ran this insane partner conference. Yes, it was a big, it was a junket. It was a big piss up. It was an opportunity to get in front of some people and really, cement those relationships. But for me, I'm a true geek. I love technology. I love cybersecurity. I love really being able to understand what it means for my clients. And those that worked with me back then knew that I was in it for them. They knew that all I cared about was solving their problems and doing it in a way that made sense to their business, that aligned with their budget and aligned with their capabilities. And I was able to then take that information from the Sophos junket and take it into everyday life. And what I found was coming back from a Bali trip or a Bangkok trip with them was that I was well equipped. I'd sat in every single session. Yes, I'd been up till 3:00 in the morning out partying with everybody, but I was back in at 8 a.m. in those sessions with my notebook ready and raring to go. When I got back, I was able to then pull up the list of my clients in my system, and I already had them straight away because I knew every single client and I really got across them. What I was able to do then was take that list, was then feed into, okay, based on what I've learned, that's going to be a real key use case. That's going to be of interest. I'm not sure of this pool a bit further down the list, but I'm going to figure out a way to articulate what I've been doing. Now, because I've been away and I've been away for a week doing that, coming back and checking back in with people was a great excuse to, how are you? How's your week been? They would ask me the same question and I would then be straight into, I've just been to Bangkok with Sophos. Oh, it was a great 4 days. The insane stuff that they're doing over there was awesome to see firsthand. And then they might ask me a few more questions, or I would then pivot in or be able to position in, probably a better word, position in the what it was that I'd learned and how I felt it was going to be relevant to them. But by telling a story instead of saying, oh, I learned about this cool thing and I think it's relevant for you. Now, if I was really clear in the fact that they were going to need or want what it was that I'd learned, I could absolutely link the dots. But if it was more so of I think I found something really cool that I think you're going to be of interest to you, but I don't know explicitly, I would then share a story. I would say, oh, we learned a bit more about this, or it was great to see this in action. And we've actually got a couple of clients now exploring it. But what I found really interesting was that this was the outcome, or this was the problem that it was solving. And what we're seeing in the industry is this, and then almost kind of move on. What would happen is the prospect or the client at that moment would then ask me more questions, or their eyes would light up, or they would show a little bit more interest, and then I'd know I've got them. If they don't, if they're like, oh, yeah, I kind of get that. Yeah, I'm hearing that at the moment, but it's not really for us. Nothing more to be said, move on. And all I'm doing there is just piquing the interest. I'm not throwing something against the wall. I'm not spending a lot of time on there, but I'm really being able to dive in, make sure that my message resonates, dive in using a story, and then be able to understand if it's going to fit with them later on. And that was my number one way of doing it. And then my number two way was then being able to utilize LinkedIn, write articles, write posts, be able to share something maybe as a newsletter style around kind of 3 key things taken away from the Sophos conference. We could tag them, we could share a bit more insight. If they want to learn more, they can find out more here. I could sprinkle more of those stories as we go through. And so that was able to then take that back, apply what I've learned and take it back into the market. And that still happens today. If I think about all of the places that I go every single week, all of my posts and all of the content that I'm sharing is based on what I've done and where I'm going and what I've learned. And that's what resonates with people because it's real. It's not me trying to pitch to you about something that I think is going to stick without knowing enough about you, but it's just sharing my experiences. And by doing that, I'm engaging more and more people week in, week out. And so if I give you a different example, so let's say we've not been to Bali, we've not been there with Sophos, but let's say somebody's just come in to the office, one of your reps has come in from a vendor, and we've got that information. We can do the same list application I mentioned, where we go through and we think, we jog our memory around everyone we're working through, and we're thinking about those 3 key learnings we've taken from that conversation. You're going to already find kind of 2, 3, or 4 of those straight away because you're going to have them in your head. But beyond that, you're going to be able to then go through and think about, okay, well, what industries are these ones that I'm piquing their interest around? And how can I take that and apply it to the other list of either white space or other ideal client profiles to be able to share more around this, to be able to understand whether that's going to pique their interest. And the same thing again with aligning that with LinkedIn, updated messaging, articles, anything that you can think of that's going to be able to spread awareness for one to many without it needing to be one-on-one. And so those couple of examples I'm sharing with you is because it just takes a bit of dot connecting. It just takes a little bit of more of a deep dive and making sure that you don't walk away until you fully understand it. Now that comes with confidence because often, in rooms I see these new salespeople coming in and they're the ones sat at the back scribbling away, but not asking any questions because you don't want to be seen as the person that doesn't know anything. I want to be the person that doesn't know anything. And that whole, really thought process aligns back to not being the smartest person in the room. You want to be the dumbest person in the room, or at least pretend like you are, because that way you're going to be able to understand and unpick, especially with those that are teaching you. In the room of a client, you don't want to be the smartest person in the room. I would probably assume that the client is, but therefore we want to be the smartest person that can ask the right questions, that can articulate the outcomes. And that will generate more opportunity than you trying to think or thinking that you know everything or trying to prove or show that you know everything. When really our job at that sales forefront is piquing interest. Have we got them? Are we where they need to be? Can we get them into a room where you can showcase more knowledge with a cybersecurity or technical expert, or with the key vendor, or with this key SaaS provider? And that really then allows you to be able to deal with more opportunity because we're not going so deep either at that first stage or second stage. It allows us to have broader conversations, and the more of those we do, the more that we can learn. And it means then that we are always learning because we are not ever at the point where we know everything. We don't know every part of the way that the technology works. We don't know every part of the way that this will integrate within their organization, but we know people that do. We know people that we can bring in. And for me, that's been the biggest way that I've been able to learn across the industry, across moving from the UK over to Australia. And the questions I get asked today are around, how do I learn more? How do I articulate that? How do I know more about this? And the way to do it is to break down every single learning requirement into what is it that it does at a high level. So in a sentence or two, what is a key selling point? Now, don't put this into ChatGPT because you probably still won't understand it. You have to be able to articulate it. It has to be your sentence, and you have to have got it from learning more about the technology or solution that you are selling. We then want to understand where it sits. So what industries are you targeting? What problems are they solving specifically? What use cases are you seeing in the market? What other partners are doing a really good job, and what areas are they selling this into? Understand and ask questions, what's going on around the world? Because a lot of these providers are global. If they are Australia-wide, what's going on in other states? If they are global, what's going on in America and Australia and the UK? If it's regional, then understand why and how it's impacting. It's really about connecting the dots of what you understand to the people you want to speak to and being able to articulate that. So at that high level, a sentence or two, moving into where are we seeing success, moving a little bit further into the competitor landscape. So where are we seeing competition and where do we elevate, or where are we seeing more success and where are we falling down? And that will give you a really good understanding of where we're pitching against. And then that story is going to be really, really useful for you to be able to use in your conversations. But that will really prove that you understand what it is that you are taking to market. And that's really the key to selling, is if you can articulate a message, drive it to an outcome, link it back to why it's important and what's in it for them, you are going to see so much more success with your outbound, with your conversations, with your expansion within accounts you've already got. And then leveraging platforms like LinkedIn, so you're not just sprouting it out behind the scenes. It's actually going out as a thought leader. It's actually going out into the big wide world, which I know scares a lot of people, but it really shouldn't, because in the beginning, it's only a handful of people that are seeing it. You get to warm up, you get to really figure out your voice and really know what's going to work and flow for you and what feels aligned, and do more of it. I mean, I would hate to look back at my very first few LinkedIn posts, because I bet they're terrible, in comparison to today. But back then, I would have been really pleased with them. It would have been a great way to start. Same thing, I think, with these podcasts. I'm sure if I went back, I think there'd be some things I would cringe about. And I don't know if you're the same, but if you're looking at those Facebook statuses we used to do all those years ago, I think I'm showing my age now. But reading them back, there was nothing more cringeworthy than 15 years ago, Harriet posting about what she ate for breakfast on Facebook. Same things apply to sales. Same things apply to understanding and really breaking down what it is that you do. And I would also add, even if you are not dealing with something that feels that complex, I can guarantee that there is a better, more succinct way to be able to get your message across and really connect with those that you want to work with. I hope you found this episode to support you in your sales journey. I hope you found it of use. If you have enjoyed it, please let me know. You can always find me over on LinkedIn, just search Harriet Meller. And if there's someone else you want to share this podcast with, you can do so with the link. And make sure you're subscribing to never miss an episode. We do release these weekly, and I'll be excited to get back into your ears and maybe into your viewing, if you're not already, on YouTube next week.